Queensland Victoria will be closed to Queensland. So that's step one, that remains closed, and that is a strong border decision that we have taken every step of the way. I think everyone will remember when Deb Frecklington called for all the borders to be open and the consequences that could have happened there. And the other initiative, the other area we're announcing today is that in relation to New South Wales, Greater Sydney will remain closed to Queensland, and that is 32 local government areas. Now, Dr. Young has provided advice to me in relation to community transmission, and as I said, Queensland will hear directly from Dr. Young about that. And in relation to the 1st of November opening date, we have been advised by the Deputy Commissioner, and he will talk to that will move to the 3rd of November from 1 a.m. That is to ensure that all the border passes that need to be renewed will be able to be renewed effectively and efficiently. So once again, a big thank you to Queensland for the great work that you have been doing, and I'll hand over to the Deputy Premier to make some comments. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Premier. That is wonderful news that we again have no cases of community transmission. That gentleman in his 50s had travelled to Stockholm, travelled back from Stockholm and was in hotel quarantine. We continue to urge people in the Ipswich area to get tested. The Chief Health Officer will outline in a moment some wastewater results from Wynnum that are also concerning, and she will urge people in that area to go and get tested. Our Premier and this government, our Premier is one who does what she says she will do. She said she would listen to the health advice. She said we would review the border arrangements at the end of the month, and that is exactly what has happened here. We monitored very, very closely the community transmission in New South Wales and Victoria, and based on the Chief Health Officer's advice, the Queensland border will remain closed to people who travel through Victoria and through the 32 local government areas of Greater Sydney. That was precisely the health advice. That's what we have done today, what we've been determined to do throughout this pandemic. The adjustment of the arrangements will come into effect at 1 a.m. on the 3rd. The Deputy Commissioner will speak to those arrangements. This is a substantial change to our border arrangements, and so it will take that time to ensure that they can be implemented smoothly. But I think what you can see here is a very, very stark contrast. Our Premier, who listens to the advice and acts on the advice, versus Deb Frecklington, who said she wouldn't borrow and announced yesterday she would borrow. She said she would cut, and she announced yesterday. She said she wouldn't cut, and she announced yesterday she would cut. She said she would have big, bold, visionary plans, but instead there are no big, bold, visionary plans. And she said she would listen to the health advice, but we now know that she will only listen to Gladys and others in the LNP. So that's the choice here. A Premier who listens to the advice and does what she says, or one who says one thing and does another.
No, we'll just now hand over to Dr. Young and the Deputy Commissioner, and then we'll come back. So we'll go over here.
Well, good morning. So good news again for Queensland. One new case overnight, a gentleman in his 50s who returned from Stockholm and was in hotel quarantine in the Gold Coast and will now be admitted to the Gold Coast University Hospital. It proves that our quarantine process is keeping Queensland safe. Then we also saw that positive sewage result in Carroll Park. I'm waiting on a retest for that sewage. Then we've just recently been told of a positive sewage test result in Wynnum. So it's really important that Queenslanders continue to come forward and get tested if they have any symptoms. That is critically important. There is a concern that we might have virus circulating. The best way to deal with that is to come forward and get tested. So anyone who lives out in that Ipswich area or who lives in Wynnum, it's really important in particular that you come forward and get tested. There are fever clinics available, and we turn around most of those tests within 24 hours. So it's quick and simple, but absolutely critical. Now, I have reviewed the situation in New South Wales. Prior to yesterday, they had 4 local government areas in Sydney that had cases of community transmission that New South Wales was unable to link to any known clusters, which means that they have transmission and they don't know where it's coming from. Then yesterday they had 4 new cases, and one of those cases they could not link to any other known clusters. The other 3 cases were linked to that case. So that meant then another area of Sydney was having cases. New South Wales put out an alert for 6 different sites across the city where they were concerned that transmission could have occurred. So based on that new information yesterday and the information up to that point, I believe it's important that Queensland remain closed to those 32 LGAs in Sydney. So as I said, there were 4 LGAs, then there was this new case which has involved additional LGAs, and we know that Sydney, of course, is one city and people move around that city. So that's why those 32 LGAs all need to be declared as hotspots. Now,